Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here from Zoobox, and for today's daily movie review, we're going to be talking about the 2016 film Shin Godzilla. The film is directed by Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi. It is written by Hideaki Anno and Sean Whitley, and it stars a bunch of Japanese people, and I won't insult them or embarrass myself, so I'll just leave it there. And we'll read the log line: Japan is plunged into chaos upon the appearance of a giant monster. Well, that is a way to put it. So Shin Godzilla. I was excited about this when it came out. I own the movie itself. I was excited because I like the director, Hideaki Anno. I am, like I've said in the past, pretty selective about anime, but one of the ones I do like, which maybe is cliche, is Neon Genesis Evangelion. That's kind of his big project, his baby that he's had some sort of dealings with off and on forever. Even since the series ended, like he's made movies, and now he's in this the rebuild series right now, which the last one I think is supposed to come out at some point. I think COVID actually kind of pushed it back, but should be coming out sometime in the near future. But anyways, I was looking forward to it, and at the time, as I've talked about when I've talked about a few other Godzilla movies, I'm not like the biggest Godzilla fan in the world. Like I don't just run out and watch something because it's got Godzilla on the name. I do enjoy it, and I've had a lot of fun, kind of, especially with my son, going through and watching some of the old movies. They're a lot of fun, and there's some of them are much better than you would imagine they'd be. But Shin Godzilla was on my radar not because of Godzilla. And when I watched the movie, I have actually a new appreciation for this now. Because when the first time I watched it, I liked it. I thought it was clever. It's a clever kind of like satire. It's a little subversive. It is very critical of the kind of the bureaucracy of Japanese government, basically, and some of their science divisions and the classes stuff that goes on amidst their government. And it's kind of relative to what happened with Fukushima with the nuclear reactor meltdown. And that's kind of what the basis is. So in a lot of ways, it is kind of an echo or a parallel of the original Godzilla, as that was a reaction to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So it has that same kind of air to it, that same kind of flavors. They're dealing with contemporary problems, and it feels very much of the now, I suppose. And I think it does a really great job. And it's interesting because the Japanese like film association, some of their like government, some of even their government officials, I feel like really saw what they wanted to see when it came to the representation of the Japanese government. They're like, this is such a sterling example of the successfulness of the Japanese Defense Force, even though it kind of makes them look like assholes for almost the entire movie, up until kind of the last, right, a little bit more than halfway through. They start getting their shit together in the sense that like they need to actually do something that's going to, I don't know, be effective. They have to at least try something, and they don't want to nuke the city. Basically, they don't want to nuke Tokyo, and so it's got all these layers in it that I think is working in ways that maybe will go over a lot of people's heads, especially if you're not really familiar with Fukushima. I'm curious how well this movie will work the further away it gets from something like Fukushima. I mean, although having said that, Godzilla 1954 works perfectly well, but I do know about what it influenced it, so. Fukushima, I don't know if it's going to have the cultural or historical impact necessarily. Maybe it should, but as the obviously those bombings in the 40s. Other things about the movie. It is definitely feels like the most of an homage to the original that I've seen in a long time. It really is kind of scales everything back. It scales Godzilla back a lot. This is probably the most inert Godzilla I've ever seen in a movie, honestly. It's kind of interesting. It's an interesting take on just the creature itself. He isn't like he causes a lot of destruction and everything like that, but it seems so. I don't know if the mindless is the right word. It's like very slow paced, and it seems like it literally is like kind of mirroring the effect of the reactor meltdown, where it's just kind of indiscriminately blowing things as it's just slowly lurching forward. Like it doesn't have a goal in mind. It's just kind of walking. Just in the same way, a nuclear meltdown, like the material, everything that happens is just going to happen. It's just this event that doesn't have a goal in mind. There is not some sort of underlying motivation for Godzilla, or at least not one that the movie ever explicitly kind of represents. You go back and watch the old one, he is a little bit more, he's way more aggressive. He's more like a tsunami. He's coming in and tearing shit apart just because he sees it. In this one, you don't even get that sense. You don't even get the sense that Godzilla is like aggressive in that way until maybe he's like attacked. So it's kind of an interesting just take on the creature itself. Other things, obviously, like I said, I think the satire works really well. I think it's actually a really funny movie. And very thoughtful at the same time about what it has to say about kind of the slow moving nature of bureaucracy and how much bullshit it is, even though people are dying all around you. It's funny. There's even in this movie, they actually are talking about like trying to sign a stimulus bill or a relief package for the cities and the people that, have been affected by Godzilla's presence, and they can't like get it together, and they're like having to send this piece of paper all around to every like office to get stamped, and then somebody doesn't like sign it or stamp it, and they have to go all the way back over again. It's very funny, and it makes it even more funny just because things we've literally we're going through these days. It definitely underlines that stuff. If you're a fan of I think of Neon Genesis Evangelion, there's a lot of cool little Easter eggs. There's some music cues from that. Not only does they use obviously the classic Godzilla theme at the end of the movie, but there's a lot of like the kind of the battle music from Neon Genesis Evangelion, when the battle room stuff where things were getting serious, which is one of my favorite pieces of music for a science fiction movie. I've always just really liked it. What else? What else can we say about this? It is, I don't know. It's just a good kind of science fiction satire. I don't know. I think most Godzilla fans tend to like it because I think they like the social commentary that kind of comes along with something like this being, based on something that had relatively happened, just happened, really. And I do think people responded to that because I think when you think about the original, like I said, that is what makes that movie impactful. That's what makes it an interesting historical artifact. And this movie has the same kind of aura or air to it, Who's this Shaun Whitley guy? We got a white man working on it. I was looking at the other writer. It looks like he does the English translations. That's what he does. So he's not actually a writer, but he did the English translation for this film. I was curious. I was like, Hideaki Anno is working with some guy named Shaun Whitley. That's interesting. Yeah, so I would definitely recommend it. I think it's, even if you're not a Godzilla fan, it's worth checking out for sure. It's maybe a little slow pace for some people. I think that's going to get in the way of some people's enjoyments because it is more of a character piece than it is like a spectacle movie. And the characters are okay. I mean, just because they're kind of cartoonish, but I think the movie moves so fast and it's paced so well that you don't really notice it. It does a really good job of just kind of keeping the ball moving, introducing new problems, new elements. Like Godzilla himself is kind of constantly evolving into bigger, larger creature that has different abilities and different kind of modus operandi, and they're constantly having to reassess how they're dealing with the situation. The way the movie ends is pretty funny and also kind of interesting and cool, and it's weird. They already said that they're like, oh, we're actually probably not going to release like another movie in this series. It's going to be part of like the Shin Godzilla cinematic universe. I was like, oh, so they're going to go like make other monster movies that take place in the same world. The way the movie ends is like literally they freeze Godzilla in place, like in the middle of his path of destruction, and he's just stuck there. And they're like, well, we gotta make sure that we're ready next time. We got to be ready for when this happens again. And I guess that's kind of another commentary about what happened in Japan, and just like, well, and the same thing that happened in America, right, with COVID, or actually around the world. But you're just like, okay, well, now we know that we have to be prepared for this kind of stuff. You can't just kind of sit on your hands and think like, well, it'll probably happen, but that's so far away. Eventually, your chickens are going to come home to roost, as it were. And they leave it on kind of a cliffhanger where you see like these humanoid creatures that are like growing out of Godzilla's the end of Godzilla's tail. And they're kind of just frozen there, and you're like, oh, okay, well, this was going to take some sort of interesting turn. We have these little humanoid Godzilla creatures running around. Very reminiscent of Godzilla 1998, right? At the end, when you have like the little raptor Godzillas, the baby Godzillas. Yeah. I don't know, so I wish that they were going to do a follow-up. I know that they couldn't for a while, up until at least 2020, because they made a deal with Legendary Studios that they would not release something with Godzilla in the title in theaters while they were doing stuff. And the Legendary ones are the ones that like Godzilla, King Kong versus Godzilla. That's coming out, I think, next year. I think it was supposed to come out this year, though, if I'm not mistaken. No, I think it always was coming out next year. But anyways, yeah. So there's just been too many movies with Godzilla in the name, and they haven't been able to get anything ready, and then blah, blah, blah. So I think that's why they were going to do their expanded universe thing. But now that apparently that contract or whatever, that deal expired in 2020, so hopefully maybe that'll open them up to making another one like Shin Godzilla 2. I'd be down, man. I want to see that. I want to see what happens. You can't just leave me like this. Another, kind of interesting note about the satire that I actually really enjoyed as well is that they have like this kind of American presence in the movie that's working almost like the CIA or something, like the shadow government type bullshit. And they're kind of pulling some strings behind the scenes, encouraging them to engage in certain behaviors. And it's just like one of these, another thing that they kind of added in there about the way that the governments will take advantage of tragedies or natural disasters or whatever to kind of achieve tangential goals or try out some sort of piece of technology. It has all that stuff too. And I think a lot of that just went over people's heads, especially Japanese people. They don't seem like they really responded to like how critical this movie is of the Japanese government. Maybe they're in denial. I don't know. It won a bunch of like Japanese Academy Awards. Hideaki Anno wins for Best Director, wins Best Picture. I think it wins Best Screenplay over there. Which, I like this movie, but I don't know. I guess that speaks to the kinds of movies that come out in Japan. Maybe they just don't have a lot of like really good stuff. I don't know. I'm not like really current on Japanese cinema, so that's my fault. That's my American privilege, I guess. But anyways, yeah, so you should check out Shin Godzilla. I know this is really rambling. Sorry. A lot of caffeine this afternoon. Anyways, you guys be good. Watch Shin Godzilla. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox and Zoobox Nation, there's a bunch of links in the description for Facebook, for Instagram, for my personal Twitter, Dan's Twitter. Also, if you would like to make a recommendation for one of these daily videos, throw it down in the description and we'll put it on the list. All right, everybody. You have a good one.